some beer this year. If you've enjoyed your dinner, I think it would be a good idea to give a round of applause to the staff of Cheetah Little Catering. So I think most of you have finished your dessert, but if you haven't, as you continue to enjoy your dessert, let's get on with the awards presentation. And tonight we will be celebrating the achievement of 2 distinguished aviation professionals with NAA Awards. Wow, I'm not sure where that came from. To present the first award, I would like to invite Ron Blake up to this podium. Ron? You out there? There you are. So as Ron comes to the front, I would like to remind you all that our silent auction will end after the NAA Awards. If there's something back there you're interested in, please step back in the next couple of minutes to place your final bid. I have heard a challenge on the extra ride, so go on back there and run it up. I know you'll get outbid, so please.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Tonight it's my honor and pleasure to present one of our NAA awards to Dan Martin, a Certificate of Merit from the National Aeronautic Association. And this says, for his contribution to the sport of aviation as a veteran unlimited air race pilot flying vintage World War II fighter aircraft in the annual National Championship air races at Reno, Nevada. Anyway, I've known Dan for probably about 20 years, primarily from my association with Cherry Gabe, who I think Dan kept out of a lot of trouble when the P-51 he bought as a very low-time pilot. You know, Dan started out in a similar way, you know, flying Piper Cubs, I think, with an Army flying club when he was in the military, and then he got into AT-6s and P-51s and became just an expert pilot and a check pilot, you know, an instructor, and he was a real guidance to a lot of the newer T-6 and P-51 pilots who probably would have killed themselves without Dan's guidance. And Dan's just been a great guy over the years. He's entertained hundreds of thousands of people at air shows, flying in the Reno air races, you know, flying his airplane, and Dago Red also. His airplane was Ridge Runner, he named, a surplus military airplane that he had restored. But anyway, he's a great guy, and I think we're better off hearing what Dan Martin has to say about himself than hearing from me. So anyway, welcome Dan Martin. Thank you, Dan. Congratulations. Okay. He says we gotta hold this plaque so we can see it.
Okay, yeah.
You gotta hold it. Okay. I wanted. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Ron, for all that accolades. Anyway, I started flying back in the mid-'60s and attended my first Reno air race about 50 years ago in 1966, and was amazed at what was happening up there. Never thought that I'd ever be involved in it. However, as time went on, I met a fellow by the name of John Crocker here in the Bay Area, and he was involved in a P-51 club. And when I knew that, when I found out, I went over to see him and convinced him that I'd be a good member in that flying club, and he accepted my membership, and that's how I got into Warbirds. A few years later, Jack Flaherty and Connie Edwards from Texas bought all the remnants from the 1969 soccer war in El Salvador, and John was commissioned to go down there and bring all the scrap back, 6 flying airworthy P-51s and a bunch of basket cases and parts and what have you. And while I was down there helping him with this, I saw, oh, it's gone, Ridge Runner sitting in the weeds with a hole in the side of it and no engine and all the parts missing off of it, and cut a deal with Jack Flaherty to buy it and put me on the easy payment plan. My brother and I scraped up all the money and I emptied our bank account. Thank you, Mom. and we ended up with a P-51. When I got it back, I took it apart and cleaned it up, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what the heck's going on here. So I loaded it on a truck, and I took it to Chino and had Bruce Gessling build it. And about 3 years after that, in 1978, it was a Flyer with a brand new paint job on it. And I raced it for the first time in Mojave, reluctantly. Wasn't interested in it, but they needed to fill the field, so I told them I would go down there and fly. And it was so much fun, I continued to race. And my brother and I thought, if we're going to do this racing, we will not do anything to the airplane other than race it. I don't want to tear it apart, cut it up, make it go faster or anything like that. And of course, after racing for a couple, 2-3 years, in 1982, I had a in-flight fire and an accident at Reno and made scrap out of the airplane again. And it took a couple years to rebuild it, thanks to Steve Hinton and the Chino gang down there and a few other people. They had the parts to help me put it back together. And I flew it around for another 10-15 years and decided in 1997 to go racing again with the same philosophy that if I was going to fly it, I didn't want to cut it up. And what we would do was to try to rig the airplane, put bolt-on parts on it, and then you could take it apart after the races and put the seat in the back and drop tank shackles back on it, and you're a daily driver and going to air shows. So we did that and until 2010, and flying it in that configuration, we started out at about 410 miles an hour in 1997, and by the time I was done with all the little add-ons and rigging and bolt-on parts, we got it up to about 480 plus, and which is pretty good for a super stock P-51. In about 2006, I got a chance to fly Dago Red, which was an amazing airplane, and we didn't have much luck the first year. And in 2008, we raced it again with a little more luck, but still not enough to win the gold. And I have to say, along the way, that I've probably met some of the most interesting people in this aviation business, some of the best flyers and male and female along the way, and I feel privileged to be able to do this, and I hope I can continue to do it. Not the racing part, I think I'm done with that, but I still like flying the P-51, and I hope to continue for a while yet. So anyway, thank you very much.
Well, hello again. Hi. I'm very pleased to introduce our second awardee and a very dear friend of mine, Carl Honecker. Now, when Carl was first approached about this award, he really didn't think that he was worthy of it. And this is the same self-effacing attitude I have come to know him over the past 15 years working with him. I think when you hear some of the things he's been involved in, you too will share my enthusiasm for presenting this NAA Certificate of Merit to Carl. So I came to know Carl when he took the job as Assistant Director of County Airports. In that position, Carl came in as my boss, a relationship we enjoyed. Well, I enjoyed it. I don't know about him. Until a couple of years ago. But that was not Carl's first aviation adventure. Mr. Honecker was in ROTC at his lovely wife Karen's beloved Nebraska. After graduating, he went to pilot school, where he ended up flying and commanding P-3s all over the world. I personally have enjoyed many lunchtime stories of flying bar doors to Reykjavik, engine failures over the Gulf of Mexico, or countless patterns in the IMC over the Atlantic. And I'm sure if you would like to learn more about those, he'd be happy to regale you with them. When Honecker's Navy flying days came to an end, he was stationed at Moffett. And as commander and XO, Carl had many responsibilities. Perhaps one of the most public was that of running the final Naval Air Show at Moffett. And I'd like to see a show of hands of how many of you made it to one of those days of the final Navy Air Show out at Moffett. I know I did. Yeah, look at that. That was my first air show, quite frankly, as I came from Oklahoma and never had anything like that. It was a real experience. It was also this time at Moffett that Carl grew to love Hangar 1 and recognize its importance as a cultural icon for a region of the country that largely lacks one. When the Navy wanted to tear it down, Carl worked tirelessly with a committee of other enthusiasts to ensure that our skyline would not fall bereft due to government mismanagement. Although we did not get everything we wanted, the skeleton remains, and there's still hope that one day Hangar 1 will again have clothes. This is in no small part due to Carl's knowledge, involvement, and leadership. When Moffett Naval Air Station was scheduled to be closed as part of the BRAC, one of Carl's final jobs in the Navy was its orderly closure. But what do you do with an airport on the edge of Silicon Valley? Well, turn it over to NASA, of course. The timing of this change coincided with Carl's decision to retire from the Navy, and NASA snatched him up to once again run the airfield. Honecker stuck it out with NASA as long as he could before taking a short hiatus from airport operations while he ran the facilities for the Tech Museum. And while he wasn't running an airport while at the Tech, he was on the San Jose Airport Commission, a position he held for 8 years, and it was at this time that the Airport Commission had real responsibilities and the power to make decisions. Of the many contentious issues he dealt with, I would imagine that taxicab negotiations and airline noise complaints were some of the toughest. I sat through some of those as a student at San Jose State, so I know how exciting they were. It wasn't long until he was back in the seat piloting an airport once again, when he took the job as assistant and then director of Santa Clara County Airport Systems. While there, he oversaw many changes and improvements, including the handoff of control of the Palo Alto Airport to the city of Palo Alto. When he finally made the decision to retire from the county, he was once again snatched up to run Moffett, this time as a contractor for Google, who had successfully bid on operating the airport in a contract that will extend beyond my lifetime. There, Carl is overseeing some major capital projects will modernize and ensure the continued vitality of this incredible aviation resource in our own backyard. And it may include reskinning Hangar 1. Carl also gets to play with some cool toys, provide support to our armed forces when they come to the area, and perhaps more exciting, welcome Air Force One. So Carl's certificate reads, come on up here, Carl. Certificate of Merit to Warren Carl Honecker for his lifelong service to the aviation community as a Navy pilot and commander, XO and airport manager of Moffett Field, director of Santa Clara County Airports, and Aero Club of Northern California board member. Right over here.
Knows me as a man of few words, and I'm appointed this evening, and no, I'm just kidding. No, I really wanted to say it's been a long run, and I've had a lot of fun, and I want to say thank you to Eric for this wonderful award. Thank you to the Aero Club for considering me for this, and thanks to the NAA for this wonderful award. It's a distinct honor for me to receive this. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about all those fun stories Eric talked about, but he pretty much covered it. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a distinct honor and privilege for me to introduce our Crystal Eagle awardee and guest speaker this evening, Mr. Steve Hinton. Shaking your head no down there. You're not ready for this? So, Steve, come on up here. Join me. I'm sorry, we're going to have a small interruption here. I was just being flagged down from the back because the silent auction is now closed unless I see somebody running back there. No? All right, that's it, Ron. We're good to go. Thank you all. All right, back to our main event here. From his early childhood, watching the operations at Naval Air Station China Lake, to starting the Motion Picture Pilot Association, to presiding over the Planes of Fame Museum, Steve has had many varied accomplishments in his life. Clearly, Steve was destined to be a pioneer from a young age, but it was likely his family's move to Claremont, California that really started Steve down the path. If there's one specific neighbor in Claremont that can likely be attributed to providing the direction of Steve's life, that would be Edward Maloney. You see, in 1946, Ed purchased the very first item for his future aviation museum, Planes of Fame, the very museum Steve is now charged with directing.